first remembrances of being here, we had a little cottage that we rented. I don't know who we rented it from. It was right across the road over in Miller's Bay. At that time, that was just a dirt road. I mean, things weren't built up here in those days. I bet at that time there probably weren't 40 inboard boats on the lake. Most people had oars. And there were a few outboards. And they were all boat liveries, you know, for fishermen go out to catch fish. This was a fishing lake in those days. It's a deep lake, between 135 and 140 feet deep. It is a glacier lake, not a prairie lake. There's a difference. Prairie lakes maybe 12 feet, 15 feet deep. So from then on, my family kept coming up here. One summer we went up and stayed at Templar Park, which is up on Spirit Lake. It was a beautiful poured concrete, I think it was 3 or 4 story building owned by the Knight Templars. They're a Masonic order. They wore funny hats and carried swords and marched around. They had a wonderful dining room. They had, for breakfast, they had sweet rolls. My mom didn't let me have sweet rolls. But some of the people there, Mr. McClintock's wife was a very large woman. Her husband, very skinny, and she liked sweet rolls, but she didn't like the pecans. I love pecans. They were sweet. She would stack them up on her plate, and then she'd invite me over to eat her pecans, which I liked. I met John Hafer. We bought our cottage in 1947, and we were gradually getting it restored. And it might have been the spring of 48, the more I think about it, because we started work on it in 47. We were finishing it up in 48. And school probably got out near the 1st of June. June is always a cold month up here. It can be down in the 40s at night, and water is still pretty cold. My mom didn't like to be up here in June. Anyway, every day I had to get a certain amount of work done. Of course, I didn't have a car, but I had a boat with that blue 16-foot Chris Craft. In those days, most of the people had boats on buoys. So the only way I had to get around was that boat. So I'd go out, and I wasn't on a hoist. I had to swim out to get it. The best thing I could do is just strip my clothes off, jump in the water, go out, get the cover off. We had a canvas cover on the boat. Strip that off. I'd always start it before I'd drop it off the buoy. And we had a buoy rope with 2 hooks, one you put on one way, one so that they wouldn't ever come off by themselves. And so it was a little rigmarole to get that unhooked. So I'm out there bare ass getting that darn boat unhooked. Then I take it to the dock, have a towel there, dry off, put my clothes on, go on up to Spirit Lake. Then I would stop in to see John Hafer at his boatworks, because he was still building boats then. And his little boy Glenn was with him. Well, he wasn't real little, he was older than I was. Probably 10 years older than I am. I mean, he's gone now. But Glenn was helping his dad. But Glenn was not the craftsman that John was. And I first saw a Hafer boat when I was staying at Richardson's cottages, still in Miller's Bay. We stayed there for a couple of years. And in those days, they had an ice cream boat on the lake. They had a driver dressed in a white outfit, and then always a nice looking young girl getting the ice cream for you, ice cream bars, ice cream sandwiches, dipping that stuff out. They had it was a big, probably 33-foot, 35-foot Hafer launch. They built big launches in the early days. They had Red Wing engines made by Red Wing up in Minnesota. cast iron wonders, big cylinders, and I think you had to start them with a bar, turn the engine over, had to put, there were holes in the flywheel, turned over that way. And at that time there were still quite a few of those big launches on the lake. This is back in the 30s. So I had to park the boat someplace, and I knew Mr. Hafer up there. So I'd always go in and see John, because I was interested in what he was building. He was building boats. By this time, he was building these great big fat rowboats, and he still built a few narrow, tulip-shaped ones. He still built a few of those in the wintertime. Hafer boats are the best on the lake. I mean, those Hafer rowboats. And Wilson Boat Works built boats also, same style. They were good boats. And Andy Vestergaard Resort, he's another Dane. He had a boat shop, and he was a good friend of John Hafer. And so John let him use his drawings and how to build the boats. And so he built the same boats like John, but just rowing boats. He would usually build a boat a winter. I don't know how many Hafer would build. But then Hafer started to build these outboard kind of boats that you could put like a 50 horse, 35 horse Johnson on and sit up in the front, drive. And then he started to build, I think, 14-foot inboard boats with a 4-cylinder gray marine. And then pretty soon he was building, he put 75s in them. And some of the last boats had 90s. And they would go. They would really go. 75s are pretty good. 45s, if you had more than 2 people in them, it's hard to get the bow down unless you got up front. I mean, they were kind of doggy with a big load. Well, the family was very active in the area. The Webbs are Hafers. I think Webb was the principal of the school or something at one time. Maybe one of them was a doctor. They married well. They married pretty well. One of them, when I was coming up here, after we were probably in 47, when I would come up, I didn't have a car to get here. I would ride Sioux bus lines up here. The driver, I think it was John Webb, was driving the bus. Great big guy, and I'd sit behind him, kind of off to the first seat. It was a flexible bus. One of my pals was going to rebuild a Hafer. He took a year off school. It was one of those old launches. And he did get it rebuilt, but then he was trying to put a high-powered motor in it. I think he flipped it or something. He did something with it that wasn't a good thing. And his mom didn't know he was doing this. She didn't know he was not attending school. He had it out in the garage. He was a brilliant kid. His mother was absolutely brilliant. She was a sorority sister of my mother's at University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Hail Pi sorority. There was a whole bunch of those girls from Sioux City. She didn't know that he wasn't attending school. And pretty soon, somebody came. He was in a little bit of hot water. But he was working on his Hafer. And it was an old launch. That was one of the last launches on the lake, and I suppose that's got to be, well, I was in high school, I guess. He still had that boat after I got married, because they had a cottage on Browns Bay, Sunset Beach, is where the Mitchells had a cottage. Well, that's what I've kind of devoted part of my life to, restoration of vehicles and maintain for posterity. I don't care you know, I've had the opportunity to drive them, run them, have fun with them, but I want the people coming behind me to understand what the craftsmen that built this nation built things. Because today, everything's automated, we don't have that, and I think it's kind of destroying the country, that people don't have to work with their hands. They don't have to dig a ditch. And it's really hard, like in our business, to find employees that are willing to do the hard work. They want to sit in front of a computer. And I don't know of a damn computer that's ever built anything. At one time, when we started this wooden boat club, I think Okoboji had more wooden boats than any other lake. Not true today. Tahoe's gotten way ahead of us, Winnipesaukee. But we still had, people hadn't bought the new fiberglass boats. So you go around the lake, everybody had a hoist with a wooden boat in it. And, or in their boathouses, a few boathouses around the lake that had wooden boats. Steve got the museum going here in the park. And he got a 501c3. And that's what saved the park. Because we could quickly then had a vehicle to take donations to save the park. Well, then he got out of that. We built the new museum where we're sitting now. When some of that money that we raised, and then started, paid. And we owned, there's some condos built right back there. We owned all that too. That was part of the park. But we couldn't keep it because we had some debt. But Steve, that park would not be there if it hadn't been for Steve Kennedy.